I never imagined the day would end with me stranded in the middle of a desert stretch, watching the sun dip lower as the wind pushed sand across the empty road. My phone had only 2% battery left, and the heat felt heavy on my skin, making every breath dry and warm. I had taken a wrong turn, missed a fuel station, and now I was standing alone beside my silent, useless car. There was no sound except the distant whistle of wind brushing over dunes. For the first time in a long while, I felt completely helpless. I kept looking down the road, hoping for any sign of life. Minutes passed. Then, just when I began to accept that I might be stuck until nightfall, a faint shape appeared in the distance, small at first, then slowly growing larger. My heart jumped. It was a taxi, old but steady looking, its roof sign flickering slightly in the sun. It moved closer, slowing down as if the driver already sensed my situation. The taxi stopped right beside me, and the window rolled down. The driver looked at me with calm eyes, the sort of eyes that notice everything without making you uncomfortable. His voice was gentle when he asked if I needed help. I explained the situation, trying not to sound embarrassed, but the truth was written all over me, sweaty, tired, stranded. He nodded once, and without hesitation told me to get in. There was something soothing about the way he spoke, like he wasn't just offering a ride, but offering reassurance. I stepped inside, grateful for the shade and the faint coolness of the taxi's air vent. The door shut quietly, and suddenly the world felt less harsh. As he started driving, he asked where I was headed. I told him, and for a while we just moved forward through the long empty road, letting the silence rest between us. But he had a warmth in his voice that made even silence feel comfortable. Eventually, he asked if everything was okay, if I was just stranded, or if something else was weighing on me. I hesitated, not wanting to vent to a stranger, but something about the softness in his tone made the words slip out. I told him things I hadn't told anyone in months. That my relationship back home felt distant. That my partner barely noticed when I left or returned. That I had been feeling invisible, unimportant, forgotten. I didn't mean to say so much, but once I began, it became hard to stop. The driver didn't interrupt. He kept his eyes on the road, listening quietly, nodding gently now and then, as if he understood exactly what I meant without needing explanations. His presence felt unexpectedly comforting. I caught myself noticing the way he held the steering wheel, the calm rhythm of his breathing, the warmth in his gaze whenever he glanced at me. I wasn't supposed to feel anything. Not here, not now, not toward a stranger. But the loneliness I had been carrying around for so long made even the smallest bit of kindness feel overwhelming. I tried to ignore the flutter in my chest, but it only grew stronger. At one point he smiled briefly, a small, thoughtful smile that made me look away, suddenly aware of how quickly my heart reacted. The guilt came immediately. Why was I feeling drawn to someone I had just met? Why did his attention feel so significant? It confused me, because I hadn't felt this way in a long time, not even with the person I was supposed to be with. The road stretched endlessly ahead of us when the taxi suddenly slowed near an old, barely noticeable rest stop, a forgotten patch of shade with a water tank and cracked pavement. He parked gently and turned off the engine, explaining that the taxi needed a quick check after driving such a long stretch. I stepped out with him, grateful for the moment to breathe. The air was quiet, almost too quiet. He handed me a bottle of cold water from his small cooler in the trunk, telling me to stay in the shade while he checked the engine. Even that simple kindness made something inside me soften. I watched him work, the sunset casting a warm glow around us. There was something peaceful about the moment, something strangely intimate despite the silence. As I stood there, sipping water and watching the gold light fade, I realized the truth I hadn't expected. This stranger, this taxi driver, made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. And I didn't know what that meant yet, but I knew it meant something. The desert rest stop felt like a tiny island in the middle of endless sand. The wind had softened, turning warm instead of harsh, and the sky was slowly shifting from gold to a deeper, calmer orange. The driver closed the hood of the taxi and walked toward me, wiping his hands with a cloth he kept in the door pocket. He wasn't rushing, wasn't tense, just moving with a steady, relaxed confidence that somehow eased my own nerves. He asked if I was feeling better, and I nodded. I wanted to say more, but something about the quiet between us felt fragile, like a thread that would break if I spoke too quickly. He stood beside me under the patch of shade, both of us watching the horizon in silence. It was strange how natural it felt to stand next to him, as if this wasn't the first time we'd met but the continuation of something unfinished. After a moment, he asked again about what I had shared earlier, not pushing, just inviting. I found myself talking without thinking. I told him about the emotional distance at home, about how conversations had become dry and predictable, how my partner had stopped noticing small things about me, and how I had stopped expecting anything in return. It felt wrong to admit it, but there was a part of me that had already accepted the emptiness as normal. He listened in a way few people ever have. Not just hearing words, but understanding what was beneath them. He didn't offer empty advice or rushed judgments. Instead, he told me pieces of his own story. He spoke about someone he once loved but drifted away from. About how relationships can fade not because of fights or betrayal, but because two hearts slowly stop reaching for each other. His voice carried a quiet sadness, but also wisdom, like he'd healed from something similar long ago and now saw it clearly in others. The more he spoke, the closer I felt to him. Not physically, but emotionally. The kind of closeness that builds quietly, unexpectedly, and becomes impossible to ignore. I caught myself watching him more than I should have, the way the fading sunlight outlined the curves of his face, the way his eyes softened when he talked about hope after heartbreak, the gentle patience in the way he chose his words. Every part of him felt like an answer to a loneliness I hadn't even admitted to myself. When he noticed me staring, he didn't look away instantly like most people would. Instead, he held my gaze for a heartbeat longer than necessary. Something warm flickered in that moment, subtle, unspoken, but unmistakably real. I felt my pulse quicken, and I turned my face slightly, pretending to look at the empty road instead. But the warmth lingered. He walked back toward the taxi to check the rear tire, and without thinking, I followed. The sky was now deepening toward dusk, the temperature dropping just enough to make the air pleasant. We stood close, closer than strangers normally would, as he bent slightly to examine the tire pressure. When he straightened, we found ourselves standing almost shoulder to shoulder. Neither of us stepped back. There was no dramatic music, no sudden shift, just a quiet awareness settling between us. His arm brushed mine lightly, so lightly it could have been an accident, but the way he paused told me it wasn't. My breath caught for a moment. There was no fear, no tension, only the soft realization that the distance between us had changed without either of us consciously deciding it. A long silence stretched out. But it wasn't the awkward kind. It was the kind that holds questions, possibilities, and confessions unspoken. He finally broke it with a simple sentence, spoken so gently it felt like a whisper despite his normal tone. "You seem like someone who hasn't been truly heard in a long time." The words hit deeper than I expected. I didn't respond, not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know how. Instead, I lowered my gaze slightly, feeling both exposed and understood. Night was beginning to settle in. The desert sky had turned a deep blue with the first few stars appearing. The driver gestured toward the taxi, suggesting we get back on the road before it grew too dark. But his expression held something else, something that said the moment wasn't over, even if the conversation paused. As I slid into the seat beside him once again, I felt a shift inside me. Something small but undeniable. Whatever began in the middle of this forgotten desert stop was now growing into something I wasn't sure I could stop. And I wasn't sure I wanted to. The taxi rolled back onto the road, its headlights cutting a soft path through the darkening desert. The world outside had turned quiet, painted in deep blues and shadows. Inside the taxi, the air felt different from before, warmer, heavier, filled with something neither of us had named. I could hear the faint hum of the engine, the low whisper of wind through the windows, and beneath it all, the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat, faster than usual. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, it felt almost necessary, as if we were both sorting through what had happened at the rest stop, through the closeness that shouldn't have meant as much as it did. My thoughts kept drifting back to the way he'd looked at me, how the space between us had felt impossibly small. I tried to calm myself, reminding my heart that this was just a ride, just a stranger, but the truth was impossible to deny. Something had shifted. He drove steadily, his eyes focused on the road, but I could tell he was thinking too. His grip on the steering wheel loosened and tightened in slow cycles, like he was trying to hold onto something but wasn't sure if he should. After several minutes, he finally broke the silence. "I hope I didn't make things difficult for you back there," he said, his voice quiet, almost uncertain. It was the first time I'd heard hesitation from him. You didn't, I said softly. It was unexpected, but not difficult. He nodded once, and for the first time tonight, he allowed himself to look at me a moment longer than a passing glance. There was something in his eyes, something tender, patient, and concerned. I don't want to be another reason you feel confused, he said. The honesty in his tone took me by surprise. Most people avoid vulnerability, especially with strangers. But he wasn't hiding anything. And maybe that's what made him so different, and so dangerous to my heart. I exhaled slowly. I've been confused for a long time, I admitted. Today just made me realize it more clearly. He kept his eyes on me for a few seconds before turning back to the road. The desert stretched endlessly ahead, but the inside of the taxi felt small, like a space carved just for this conversation. The headlights illuminated nothing but sand, but it felt like the world had narrowed down to the two of us. A few minutes later, he pulled the taxi to the side of the road again, but this time not because of any problem. We were only a short distance from my destination, lights glowing faintly in the distance, but he stopped anyway, letting the engine idle softly. He rested his hands on the steering wheel, took a breath, and then spoke. I need to ask you something, he said quietly. Do you want me to drop you off, and let this moment end here? He paused, eyes tracing the horizon. Or do you want us to sit here for a little longer? My chest tightened. It was a simple question, but it carried weight, an invitation, a possibility, a line neither of us had dared cross. I didn't answer immediately. I could feel the guilt lurking in the back of my mind, reminding me of the commitment I had at home, the relationship that might not be dead but certainly wasn't alive. Yet at the same time, there was this man beside me who made me feel something I hadn't felt in months, heard, seen, valued. Finally, I spoke. I don't want to cross a line I can't come back from, I said slowly. But I don't want this moment to disappear either. He nodded, accepting my hesitation with warmth instead of disappointment. We don't have to do anything wrong, he whispered. Sometimes, just being understood is enough. Those words settled into me like a soft echo. We didn't move closer. We didn't reach for each other. We just sat there, side by side in the quiet desert night, sharing a moment that held more meaning than any touch could. After a few minutes, I took a deep breath and told him I was ready. He gave a small, sincere smile, a smile I knew I would remember long after today, and began driving again. When we reached my destination, he parked gently. I opened the door slowly, not wanting the moment to end. Before I stepped out, he said, "Take care of your heart. Don't let it stay lonely." I swallowed hard and nodded. The taxi pulled away, its taillights glowing softly before fading into the darkness. I stood there watching until the road was empty again. Something inside me felt different, lighter, clearer, awakened. I didn't know what decisions I would make next about my relationship or my life. But I knew one thing for certain. I would always remember the stranger who found me in the middle of the desert, and made me feel seen when I needed it most.